Coming up on this episode of the Mario Rosenstock podcast.
And he said, I picked up the phone to an agency, and he said, when the phone was answered, the voice came on the phone and said, "Hi, this is Mother Teresa." And he literally was patched straight through. That was the person who picked up the phone on the other side.
What?
Yeah, so maybe fate was involved. So what a wonderful introduction.
Extraordinary.
And I met her once or twice, worked alongside her and her colleagues in what's now known as palliative care, but it was known as Prem Dam, Place of Hope, also home for the dying, and was exposed to such frailty, such inequity, such vulnerability, and was moved by that, that I made a promise that someday, in some imperfect way, I'd circle back and throw myself into helping people in those kind of situations.
The word inspiring is thrown around a lot these days, but I have to say that the life that my guest on this episode has led and the brave and unconventional decisions he has made along the way is nothing short of, well, inspiring. John Travers studied engineering in UCD, and when he qualified, he had a well-paid job with a large corporate energy company to walk into. However, he had a few months off before that job started, and so he went off to India and did some volunteer work, and that changed everything. As you heard in the opening clip, that experience changed something in John, and even though he returned home and spent many years forging a successful career in the corporate and the startup world, he ultimately kept that promise he made to help the sick and the vulnerable. John returned to UCD to study medicine, and today, Dr. John Travers is a practicing GP who has dedicated his life to helping the most ill, frail and vulnerable members of Irish society.
To me, that sense of purpose came a little bit later. I stumbled along and jangled through a bunch of activities that I enjoyed and did well at, but it wasn't until my late 30s that I found that passion and that vocation for helping other people, serving other people. So we all recognise frailty, and people believe that it's inevitable and irreversible as we get older. I think that's the sense that we all have, but that is a myth. That is not the case. Frailty is a very reversible state of health. He was stopped by customs and they said, "What's in the bottle?" And he said, "Water." And the customs guy said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes." And the customs guy opened the bottle and took a swig and he said, "This is gin." And the Irish priest said, "It's a miracle." On average, a doctor interrupts a patient after about 11 seconds. And I think myself, it's so important for patients to be able to tell their full story and to get all of the things on their chest out onto the table. The truth is, on average, a patient or a person will complete their story in about 17 or 18 seconds. So just a few short seconds later, you might have given them the ability to get it all out.
John has just published a book about his time working as a doctor, the people he has met and treated, and the impact they've had on him. It's called A Shot of Hope, and he'll be telling me all about his fascinating story in just a couple of minutes' time. But first, with the heatwave now in full force across Ireland, yellow warnings are everywhere. Some well-known personalities are offering advice about how to cope with these crazy temperatures. First, Michael O'Leary. Here we go again. First of all, I'm sick to the teeth of Irish people moaning and groaning about what now? The Irish heatwave. My advice for the great unwashed is to book a Ryanair flight as soon as possible to one of our wonderful European destinations to escape the overbearing Irish heatwave. Somewhere like, I don't know, Spain or Greece would be a welcome break from the searing heat. The initial stress about the weight of your luggage and the threat of astronomical additional charges will soon take your mind off that bothersome humidity outside. Experience the soothing darkness of the plane and the annoying person in the window seat beside you pulling down the blinds to sleep off the feed of 7 a.m. airport pints they've downed. Finally, you can enjoy hours of cool air-conditioned ambience on the bus from the airport to the place you thought you were actually flying to, and then you can do it all again on the way home. Perfect! Actually, just stay on the feckin' plane all day.
Well, yes, indeed, as President of Ireland, I have found in recent years that owning a sprawling historic pile and acres of garden helps immensely when the temperatures go doolally. I generally retire to the north wing of the Orus, where the marble panelling and lack of direct sunlight through the 10-foot windows offers some much-needed respite from the searing heat. Yes.
Hello there, Ivan Yates here.
And Matt Cooper.
When things get a little too hot in the studio, Matt kindly fans me with a large palm leaf as I lie on the ground, in a light kimono.
There you go.
He also whispers soothingly to me to calm me down sweet nothings when I get a little hot under the collar
Politics.
about the Greens and those nutjob independents and whatnot.
Wackos.
And you can become a subscriber to the Paths to Power podcast.
Now.
Matt will come to your home and do the same for you.
Yoo-hoo.
It's only $7.99 a month, but hurry, offer ends soon. When they've gone, they've gone.
Gone.
I can't get that image of Ivan Yates in a light kimono out of my head, so thanks to Patrick for putting that into my brain, which it won't leave for the next few hours anyway. If you want to contact me personally, it's mariorosenstock@gmail.com. Suggestions for guests, suggestions for sketches, compliments, constructive criticism, anything you want. And please tell one other person about this podcast. And of course, my thanks to our sponsor, Deluxe Bathrooms. Their summer sizzler sale has been extended until Sunday, July 13th. Up to 70% off Europe's biggest bathroom brands. Transform your bathroom for less. Upgrade your bathroom. It doesn't have to be expensive. Why not capitalize on these amazing offers while they last? You can easily transform your bathroom into what you've always dreamed of. You'll find many fantastic offers across Deluxe Bathrooms' extensive range of premium bathroom products and exclusive tiles. They have a huge selection of bathroom and kitchen tiles from the world's leading tile manufacturers in Spain and Italy. That's Deluxe Bathrooms, Ireland's premium bathroom and tile retailer. If you're dreaming of a bathroom that combines luxury, functionality and style, look no further. They're in Dundalk Retail Park and Eastgate Retail Park, Little Island, Cork. And the Summer Sizzler sale ends July 13th, this Sunday. Get on down there. So let's cross over now to the GoLoud podcast studio to meet my special guest, Dr. John Travers. For a relatively young man, he has already lived an extraordinary life, and you're about to hear all about it. But although he is relatively young, he looks far younger than he actually is, and I couldn't help but remark that before we kicked off the conversation.
So I'm sitting here in front of a man who looks like a student, and I mean like an undergraduate student. He looks about 26 years of age, and his name is Dr. John Travers. John, welcome to Mario Rosenstock's podcast.
Thanks, Mario. Delighted to be here.
What age are you?
I'm ancient. I'm in my early 50s.
You are, and I'm serious. You absolutely look in your 20s. I'm not joking. You look in your late 20s.
Thanks a million. Well, I have my genes to thank for that, I reckon.
And you cycled in here, I noticed, and you're slim as a whippet and all that.
That helps too, yeah.
And I suppose knowing a little bit about the story you're going to tell me, a kind of a quote came to mind. And one of my favourite comedians is Jim Carrey. And Jim Carrey made a great speech at a university graduation ceremony. And one of the things he said was his dad wanted to be a comedian, and he could have been a great comedian, but he copped out and he became an accountant. And he said that taught him one thing. He said, go for something in your life that you want to do, that you love doing. Go for what you love doing, because after all, you might fail at your second option.
I remember hearing that and being moved by it, and I agree completely. He's also in a great movie called Yes Man.
Yes.
And I often feel like that sometimes because so many opportunities do present themselves. And I know Dermot Whelan talked about the importance of saying no sometimes and the liberation around that. But sometimes it's good to say yes too, and see what unfolds. And Jim Carrey is an inspiration for that too in his comedy. Following your passion is extremely important, and having a sense of purpose in life. And to me, that sense of purpose came a little bit later. I stumbled along and jangled through a bunch of activities that I enjoyed and did well at, but it wasn't until my late 30s that I found that passion and that vocation for helping other people, serving other people, and I decided to do that through the means of studying medicine and working as a medic. But before that, I certainly had an interesting run at a few things as well.
Okay, and tell us about that. What did you start as?
Well, Mario, the first thing I did in study-wise was engineering. So I learned how to solve problems in the world around us and build bridges and design semiconductor chips and so on. And it was a very conventional choice because I was good at those subjects in school. But I had always had this kind of interest in social justice from a young age. And in fact, the first thing I did after I studied engineering was went to Calcutta, currently known as Kolkata, to work in a place called the Home of the Dying. Sounds a bit extreme, but it was a really rich experience, very fulfilling and rewarding.
Sorry, why did you go there? So you had studied engineering in UCD. Mm-hmm. You went to work then in the corporate sector. You went to work for Shell?
Yeah, I had a plum job out off the back of engineering. I had the job sorted, and they said to me, if you want to take some time before you start, feel free. So I said, I'll take 6 months. And I thought to myself, what will I do at that time? And as I say, during school and from a young age, I'd always an interest in inequities, people finding it hard to survive in their circumstances.
Is this just looking at the world around you or seeing the news, or had you been struck by a particular book or a documentary, or had your parents inculcated it into you? Had your dad or mum been a protester or an activist or a hippy-dippy kid? Or had they, where did it come from? Did you stumble across the film Gandhi and went, whatever?
No, great prompts, but like my parents were very caring people, and they taught us the value and the importance of caring for others. So that was definitely part of it. And in school, I did a lot of work with, say, the Vincent de Paul, and worked with children who were struggling in school, helping them in their homework clubs after school, things like that. In other schools in the city centre. Went to school in the city centre, saw a lot of deprivation. Just getting mugged several times on my way home from school count. You get exposed to the challenges and the difficulties in a very real way. Probably a little bit of a sensitive kid as well, and just very sensitive and empathetic to people around me.
Did you ever feel drawn to the priesthood?
I didn't.
No,
I didn't. But interestingly enough, I've made one of my best friends is a priest, Kieran, and it was he who put in the call to Calcutta, because I said to him, I'm really interested in doing some volunteer work, and he said, leave it with me. And a few weeks later I came back and he said, well, I've made a few calls. You can head off to Croatia soon after the war had finished with the Red Cross, or you can do something I think in Dublin, or you can go to Calcutta. I put a call in there. And he said, I picked up the phone to an agency. It was actually the Sisters of Charity, and he said, when the phone was answered, the voice came on the phone and said, hi, this is Mother Teresa. And he literally was patched straight through. That was the person who picked up the phone on the other side.
What?
Yeah, so maybe fate was involved. So what a wonderful introduction.
Ordinary.
And I met her once or twice, worked alongside her and her colleagues in what's now known as palliative care, but there it was known as Prem Dam, Place of Hope, also home for the dying, and was exposed to such frailty, such inequity, such vulnerability, and was moved by that. That I made a promise. I made a promise that someday, in some imperfect way, I'd circle back and throw myself into helping people in those kind of situations.
Were you obviously emotionally moved by this? Or was it just cerebrally moved?
I think a bit of both. I mean, as a early 20s young guy, fairly confident, looking forward to the opportunities that the world might present, I kind of took it in my stride in a slightly naive, little bit unassuming way. When you're that age, you just absorb everything you see. You're a witness to the world around you. So I wasn't, deeply emotionally moved or anything, but I was impacted in the sense that it was eye-opening, and it caused emotions such as empathy, but also a sort of a gentle anger, a sense that revolution was required. So you talk about parents being hippies or protesters. They weren't. They're wonderful, caring, but led conventional careers and lives and in their own ways. But I'm not here to describe who they are or try to judge their activities. But certainly that experience awoke in me a bit of protest, even though I've worked in very conventional ways and act very conventionally. Definitely finding a peaceful way to overthrow systems that are inequitable, unfair, is very much part of my DNA now. So
you came from obviously a very relatively prosperous part of the world to work in Calcutta. So tell me about your a pastiche of memories from Calcutta.
Just being greeted by an explosion of colour and sound and smells and heat getting off the plane. One of the first people I met when I got out of the taxi, and of course the taxi driver said, no, there's no set fee, even though I had paid at the airport and having to pay twice, but that's okay. A little boy aged 8 met me on the curb when I got out of the taxi at the place where I was arriving to, and he said, I'm Raj, let me help you. And guided me to where I was going. And he was clearly a boy who'd lived on the streets, was quite thin, emaciated, and he wasn't really looking for anything. I put my hand in my bag to get an apple, which I brought from Dublin. And he said, no money, I don't want anything. I just, he was literally there to help. And he later convinced me to buy some milk. So that's moving in itself. People who are so have such little access to resources and so on, and yet just he had this calm contentment and willingness to support and help people he met. And I got to know him gradually over my time there. And towards the end, and the book that I wrote describes this anecdote, towards the end, a whole area of shanty houses, corrugated iron dwellings, were razed to the ground by several bulldozers with no notice to the people living there. The authorities just wanted to shift an entire shanty town from one area to another. And I met Raj afterwards, and he said, my home's gone. And I said, Raj, what will you do? Will you be okay? And he said, I have my mother, I have my brother, and they have me. We'll begin again. And he was so grounded and rooted through the bare feet on the hot clay he was standing on. And I felt this sense of equanimity. And that's an amazing thing to witness. And all of the stories in the book that I wrote try to capture that spirit of resilience that he personified in an amazing way.
Mm. And so you stayed for 6 months?
I was there for the best part of 2 months, actually, because I did some other things in that 6 month break, travelled across America coast to coast with a great friend. So it was a time of adventure, and then succumbed to the golden handcuffs of the corporate career.
So then you went back into, so after having this revelatory experience, you did go back into the corporate career for a while.
Yeah, I suppose I hadn't started that job. Yeah. I had that job waiting for me out of college. And I guess at that age, it's your first shot at independence. You need to make money. You need to find your feet in the world. I had the job waiting, and I felt the right thing to do, the sensible thing to do was to start it and see how it went. And of course, it was also expressing everything that I'd done in engineering. I kind of wanted to practice that and be good at what I'd studied. So, that experience in Calcutta, although I'd made that promise, planted that seed, it didn't necessarily need to be immediate to follow through. And in fact, in fairness, Mario, I actually, to some mild shame, I kind of forgot the promise, as you do when you throw yourself back into the comfort of the Western world and all of the comforts around us, and just ploughed through the corporate world, scrambled up a ladder that was presented, and did my best, worked hard, worked long hours, travelled, was in the Netherlands, the US, London, had a great career, did some really interesting things.
You did an MBA in Harvard?
Yeah.
That's a Master's in Business Administration?
Exactly, yeah. 2-year full-time course, really privileged to go there. I was out on a summer J1 back as an engineer and walked through the campus and looked around, and I said, I will never go here because it's just this ivory tower, it's this amazing place that's such a reputation. And I had a very ordinary existence at that stage, and lo and behold, 5 years later, just applied on a whim, and they liked the essays that I wrote and the things that I had done, and they gave me a place. I was absolutely shocked.
Did you write about volunteerism?
Yeah, one of the things I did, because they're looking for acts of leadership, I suppose, taking the initiative.
Yes.
And that environment is very good at bringing an eclectic group of people together who teach each other. Everybody brings something different to the table in those classes and then contributes experiences that are educational to other people. So I guess they liked some of that, as well as other things I'd done.
And you worked for McKinsey as well, a corporate consulting firm, a famous consulting firm.
Yeah, they're a very good consulting firm, very disciplined, hard-working environment, solving problems for big corporates
and countries.
And countries. I helped the Department of Health in Tanzania, for example, on their healthcare policy. That was another exposure. That was a not-for-profit piece of work. Another exposure to that world. That copper fastened kind of the interest in that space. Yeah.
So you've had this business career. What age would you have been around this time there now, after the MBA in Harvard and after working for Shell and all this?
Late 20s, early 30s.
Late 20s, early 30s.
And then set up 3 clean energy businesses in quick succession, one after
as one does, of course. Yes.
So why not? Again, yes, the yes man mentality.
And so did you do those on your own or with other people, as in partners?
Always with teams. I was the founding CEO of 3 companies and had teams and supporters around me, and the first one I was invited into it, in fairness, by others, and led it, and they all went well, and they were getting bigger and more successful, but I was commuting Monday to Thursday night, Fridays in airports all over the place, from London to Leicester to Copenhagen to Houston, and realising this is not a sustainable way of life.
Your way of life.
That's what I was doing, yeah. I was enjoying it. And, there was something good in creating solutions for the energy crisis and coming up with cleaner alternatives to the fossil fuels that we're all addicted to. So I enjoyed that. I enjoyed the business aspects, but, continued to volunteer in my spare time. Weekends in a place that did equine therapy for children in touch with the law and children with special needs.
Equine therapy?
Yeah, I know, yeah.
What
horse therapy. It's
what is that?
A fancy word. It's basically a beautiful environment in Wicklow called Festina Lente, where children with special needs and maybe who have divergent personalities and so on, they are put in touch with these strong but gentle animals. And they have an amazing connection with the horses, and who are non-judgmental, who treat them as they are. And the children, all of their worries and their tensions unfurl in the presence of these amazing animals. And so I was there mucking out and saddling up and helping the kids and enjoying that. And then I know this sounds kind of ridiculous, but I spent a summer holiday in Ghana. Went out on spec. A friend had advised it was a great place to go. They'd done volunteer work. I know it sounds a bit over the top, but anyway.
Ryanair are now flying to Ghana. 2 weeks, put your feet up and shut up.
Well, it was great. I arrived at the airport. There was another guy, talk about priests. There was a guy, he had a bottle of clear liquid, and he was stopped by customs, and they said, "What's in the bottle?" And he said, "Water." And the customs guy said, "Are you sure?" And he said, "Yes." And the customs guy opened the bottle and took a swig, and he said, "This is gin." And the Irish priest said, "It's a miracle." It's been transformed. So I had some fun experiences. Ended up working in a hospital, and the stories that I listened to from the people there were so moving and honest, and resonated with that calling to work in that environment and help people in need, that I made a decision at that point to say, look, I've enjoyed this corporate activity and it's been my major focus, and the minor focus has been this really enjoyable volunteer work. Why don't I switch them in my life, in my late 30s?
This is the move. Amazing time of your life as well. I suppose your late 30s is a time where you have potentially a lot of experience, all your vigour, and yet, although with a lot of experience, you have your whole life still ahead of you.
For sure.
Especially if you're healthy.
Yes.
And so it's a nexus point in your life where you can make it an important decision.
Yes.
And you did. You decided to return full-time to being a helper, a carer of people. But in, again, typical you, a kind of an alpha, almost an alpha way of doing it. What did you do?
Yeah, and I'm very not alpha, as friends and family will say, for sure, very far from it. But anyway, I decided, how would you make impact in that area? Well, let's do it in a structured way. I went back to study medicine because I could bring tools and techniques. And look, I'm very...
How many years did you study medicine?
Well, the graduate entry is a 4-year course. It's really 3.5 because you start in September, finish in May. And that... it felt like a really good way to bring knowledge and tools to what I wanted to do. I don't think I could have done the 6-year course with people straight out of school. Everybody in my course had studied or worked before, so I was sort of surrounded by like-minded people.
And so 4 years, and then what?
Then you do a year internship where you're learning the ropes. You're
now in your early 40s?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had my first daughter. Okay. Born days before my first.
How are you making a living, do you mind me asking, while you were studying?
I'm not. I've stopped taking an income for 4+ years.
Do you have a bit of savings?
Had savings from the previous work. Used them and kind of went back to basics. I took out a blank sheet of paper for all of this, Mario, I suppose, and kind of started again. And I appreciate there's a sense of privilege and in being able to do that. Not from a material point of view, but in the generation that we live in. Like a generation ago, this would have been mad stuff. But now life allows that, and the country we live in allows that. And I suppose backing yourself allows that too, in saying, I'm going to hopefully land on my feet. But at the same time, life is way too short for subscribing to something you're not into, that you're not passionate about. And we owe it to ourselves and our family and the people we love to do something that we have a sense of purpose about. Whether it pays or not, you need to put bread on the table, but this is the ultimate goal for all of us, is to find
totally.
that passion. Yeah.
As I've grown up as well, I mean, I've always found, and I've heard other people, listen to other people talking about it, and if you do what you love doing and you're drawn to it and you are motivated and driven by it, and you're it's almost as if you have to do it. It's compulsive. A living will find its way to you. Yeah. Now, it may be great, medium or lowish living, but a living will find its way. And whatever living that way is, it will fulfill its main purpose to keep you engaged, totally engaged with what you're doing. And in the moment, in the present, doing what you do, not thinking about, I can't wait. You know, this kind of world we live in of like, it's Wednesday, it's the hump of the week, only 2.2 days to Friday, where you can just forget about all your troubles, and then it'll be Monday again, and then it'll be 4 days for Friday, and then we can dream of our holidays, 2 weeks in Torremolinos, and everybody's dreaming of getting away from it, instead of being in it.
In the moment,
just being in your life. And then they're going, and then there's a macrocosmic level of that when they go, now I can't wait till I'm 65 and to get out on that golf course. Day one, they drop dead from a heart attack. Why? Because, they've lost their purpose in life. They didn't even know it, but they've lost their purpose. You should never retire. But there's no such thing as retiring. The word retire shouldn't even exist in the language. You should continue to do what excites and interests you till the end of your life. Yeah. I remember watching John Gielgud pick up an Oscar for best supporting actor when he was 95. Walked up to the podium, 95 years of age. And people all the time now are doing this more and more. You must be motivated and driven by what you do. In your case, it's a beautiful thing to see a person motivated by social justice and wanting better conditions for other people. You became a doctor. What branch of medicine did you?
I've gone into general medicine, so general practitioner, effectively, which means you must know something about everything. And it's a specialty in its own right. It made sense for me because it allowed me to work and live in the community. And also at the stage I was at, going into, say, cardiology or neurology would be a much longer training path, in fairness. And I just felt, be sensible.
And did you use was it your intention, and have you used your medical degree to expand your volunteerism, to go around the place?
Yeah, I have.
Tell us about those stories.
Well, again, without sort of lauding it or anything, like I just was drawn to work in a walking clinic for people experiencing homelessness here in Dublin city centre. I was drawn to work with international protection applicants, asylum seekers, also here in Dublin and Ireland. But then I also do normal GP work, if I can call it that. And I teach in Trinity, and I teach some of the work I've done on building resilience and reversing frailty in older people who also represent sometimes a vulnerable group, and people experiencing homelessness. So there's a little bit of a diversity there in the areas I work.
I'll ask you about those then. I think I just read a little bit about you, and you were one of the early proponents of a lot of a high protein diet and strength exercising for people who are getting older.
Yes.
This is very important for people who are aging. We're all aging, but people who are advanced aging, isn't it? Tell us why.
Well, look, there's a huge sense of hope here, because I think since the beginning of time, humans understand what it is to be frail. Thousands of years ago, there was this adage, see how the frail tree is overturned in the wind. And I think that perfectly captures the sense of vulnerability, what it is to be frail. You know that line from Patrick Kavanagh says, every old man reminds me of my father.
Yes, I do.
It's beautiful, it's poignant and quite moving, but it also speaks to the universal nature of what frailty is, because we don't see, it's not that we are mistaken to see someone we know, but we recognise the body language of frailty, that stoop, the tentative gait, the dependence on a stick potentially. So we all recognise frailty, and people believe, I think, that it's inevitable and irreversible as we get older. I think that's the sense that we all have, and it's reflected in research I've done. But the hope that I talk about is that is a myth. That is not the case. Frailty is a very reversible state of health. And the research that I've led over 8 or so years demonstrates how it can be reversed with really simple strength-based exercises and sufficient protein in your diet. And you might say, cheapers, exercise and diet, everybody knows that. But the science around it hadn't been investigated, and the effects on older people in particular hadn't really been investigated. So we did that, and it became a really important part of the medical knowledge now around how we treat older people. The hope, again, as I say, is that we can reverse that state of frailty. And in doing so, we can reduce the risks of falls, the risks of dependency, loss of independence, hospitalisation and mortality. We can actually reverse that state with those simple interventions.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I've read a little bit about it myself, and one of the things that I'm always reminded of is, do you know, in that expression that we use sometimes in the English language when you're walking down the street and you say, oh, there's a little old woman. Well, the reason you say it's a little old woman is because her skeletal musculature has disappeared.
Yeah.
And she has actually shrunk. It's not as if she was always a small person, but it's just that she's gradually disappearing from lack of muscle mass.
And bone mass.
And bone mass. And that is what getting old does to you. And that's what aging can do to you unless you take action to reverse it and stop it. And when I say reverse it, I think it's reversible. Yeah, almost.
It is. And look, we all lose our muscle and bone mass from age 30. So you and I, Mario, we should be doing our push-ups now regularly and wall squats and use your own body weight to put resistance on your muscle.
And that's all you need, your own body weight.
All you need.
Yeah.
And you don't need to go be buying expensive protein shakes. Use protein in your normal diet.
Yeah.
Plant-based, non-plant-based, whatever your preference.
Yeah.
There's great source of protein.
Yeah. You mentioned a very key expression there, and that's falling over. A lot of older people eventually succumb from falling over because it starts with the fall. It then it starts with the fall, an injury, a weakness. Then later it's another fall. That fall, hospital. Then you hear about sepsis or pneumonia or something. And they die from a secondary or tertiary sort of condition that they didn't go in for. And so the thing is, I suppose, avoid going to hospital, be able to go to the toilet, if you like, off your own steam.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, to be able to, because the natural, for example, to actually use a toilet is the act of squatting. But the squatting is of course a musculature exercise.
Yes, it is.
And you must be able to do that yourself.
Yeah.
And so you should develop the muscle mass to be able to do that yourself and maintain your independence.
And let's be honest, we can't stop time. We can't stop all the processes of aging, but we can do preventative things from a young age to put ourselves in the best position to navigate all of that when we get older.
What did you do with homeless people in terms of resilience? I mean, you've spoken about older people. What did you do with homeless people?
You know, the prevalence of frailty amongst older people is 12% for people aged over 65, 50% for people over age 80. So it's quite prevalent in an older group. But in the homeless population, almost 90% of people who are homeless are either frail or pre-frail. And so it's a really vulnerable group. They're not eating as well as they'd like. They are subject to vulnerabilities on the street. They're not sleeping well. Some have difficulties with addiction and so on. So there's a whole constellation of factors that are risk factors for frailty. And so we said, well, why don't we shift our focus from the success we've seen in older people and see, can the same be applied to this group? And we're currently studying and working on interventions. You would be so surprised how impactful these simple interventions have. And look, homelessness now also encompasses a very wide group of people who are couch surfing, who are staying in hotels, who are staying in friends' houses, and as you mentioned, staying on streets. But taking the time to invest in this intervention, explain it with people, is really well received and can make a big difference.
Listen, just describe for the people listening to this podcast, as I said earlier on in the podcast, you look really young. I mean, I'm not just saying that. You look to me, you look in your late 20s, early 30s. You're 52 years of age. You have a very kind face when I'm talking to you and you're looking at me. You're very open and you're very gentle. You have a very gentle voice. You're great at listening and you're very polite at putting your own thing forward. You speak quietly, but coherently and eloquently. You're living in a world which is less and less like any of the things you are. You're living in a world which is increasingly dominated by corporatism, greed, the free market, and the so-called leader of the free world, who is an exponent of out-and-out cruelty. and almost a wanton joy in the cruelty. The American administration at the moment, people like Stephen Miller, J.D. Vance, who saw their treatment of Zelensky in the Oval Office, Trump himself and the rest, they are cruel, cruel people, and they seem to revel in their own cruelty. This is a very different world from the world you even grew up in. And the world, how do you feel about your place in the world? I mean, your place for people like you in the world, because it seems as if you're losing the battle. That's one way of putting it. Less people are listening to you, and more people are listening to the cruel people.
What a great question, and it prompts lots of thoughts. Firstly, you're right. There's lots of aggression. That's the alpha environment that I don't subscribe to, that you've described. But I would say it's been always like that. This is what it is to be human, to live in a world where the instinct to survive sometimes manifests in aggression that's important, and yet can sometimes lose the run of itself and be over domineering and suppress and oppress other people around you to the benefit of yourself. And that's where the line is drawn. But what I would say on that sort of quiet resilience, that quiet approach to life, I think I don't agree that is on the losing side. I think that there's so much more interesting collaborations in society, and there's so much more to unfold around that battle, if you like. I think there is such a thing as quiet leadership. And I think it's a very powerful form of leadership, where people lead by example, where people encourage others around them to achieve their greatest potential, not simply because they themselves want to be at the top of the pile, but because you want to achieve great outcomes for the world, for your community, for yourself and your family. So I suppose that the last thing I'd say on that is you could take two views of the world, glass half full, glass half empty. And I'm of the opinion that ultimately, despite this mix of personalities and leadership styles and approaches to governing and so on, that the human race ultimately has some really great qualities that will rise to the surface and enable us to sustain ourselves and thrive. And actually the truth is we are way better off today than we were generations and centuries ago. And Steven Pinker, the thinker from MIT, would say the same. Despite all of the calamities and stresses and the things that the media shove down our throats in daily that cause stress and anxiety, we are still advancing and progressing. And the last thing I'll say is, this is the ultimate last thing, is that the people that I met on the journey of medicine over the last 14 years who show resilience at life's most vulnerable moments, when they've been levelled by illness, when they are falling and trying to get back up, when they've been kicked in the teeth by various circumstances, the resilience that they show is really inspiring. And it reminds me that we all have this gift that at life's worst moments, we can find strength to rise up again, and to not only survive, but to thrive.
And the Pulitzer Prize goes to Dr. John Travers, ladies and gentlemen. Lovely speech, very eloquent. That's an interesting thing you point out. It reminds me of something else, and that is the Homo sapien is the most successful species that has ever existed on planet Earth. You could add the dinosaurs there as well. They were very successful until they got unlucky with a meteor. But we are more successful because we're smarter. And you identify that resilience as being one of our smartest things. I was in a taxi yesterday with a guy he was talking about a guy he picks up all the time, and he was just in a wheelchair since he was very young, and just one of the most amazing people he's ever met. This guy is a leader in so many fields, and one of the reasons is because of his disability. He decided from very early on, I am not going to let this. In fact, I'm going to go the other way. Mm-hmm. And so when somebody they see a light almost like that, they go, I'm so lucky to be alive. Mm-hmm. Forget that I don't have the use of my legs. I'm just lucky to be breathing. Mm-hmm. And they make the most of their life. Resilience. Having said that, though, there is, in the orthodoxies that prevail around the world, I am right to say that, there is a kind of a hegemonic free marketeer ideology kind of dominating sort of political and economic thought. You know, the idea of crush your opponent, dominate your enemy, be the alpha male in your sphere is very much part of the zeitgeist at the moment. However, there is an interesting guy. I'm sure you've read him. His name is Rutger Bregman. Oh, you haven't? Very good. Well, the Dutch social philosopher,
Great.
Economic social philosopher. And if you may remember him as the guy who went to Davos a few years ago and made a kind of an international viral sensation of himself. So he's a Dutch social philosopher. He's quite young, and you know, he says it as it is. And he made a little speech in front of a number of billionaires, and they were all billionaires really, and they flew in their jets. And they thought they were going to hear him talking about climate sense and that sort of stuff. But he kind of went off on a different tangent. He went, how bizarre that we're all standing here talking about the climate and there's 150 private jets outside the door and you've all turned up. But that's not what I want to talk about. Why don't we talk about the elephant in the room? And they all got worried. Let's talk about tax. Why aren't you paying your tax? And this, of course, caused, you know, a flurry of activity in the room. This is so he was talking about why they don't pay their fair share of tax, and that is part of the inequity of the modern world. But this guy, Rutger Bregman, is famous as well for his studies, and his studies are concentrate on humans, and the idea that he propounds, from having read his stuff and done his stuff, that human beings are more successful not when they try to dominate each other and alpha male each other, but when they cooperate, and that it is deeply embedded within the human instinct to help other humans, not to crush or to be fearful, but to help. So you do have some philosophy on your side, John.
Absolutely. And I lived in Holland for 4.5 years, and I loved the culture there. And one of the things that struck me was that their leadership style is to build consensus. And this reflects what he's saying. And I'm delighted. There are proponents of this way as well. And that
it leads to prosperity.
Yeah, absolutely. It does. I mean, when we collaborate, when we live as a community, and history will bear this out. You know, when we were all roaming around as individuals and tribes and warring, it was a pretty rough state of life, and
not much progress is made.
Exactly, it was called, and then moved through the dark ages for a good reason. It was called that. But when we figured out how to live together in societies and cities and communities, and have, you know, sensible, conventional guidelines to help us through that, then we did prosper more. And you know, John Maynard Keynes also talked about the invisible hand of capitalism, and you talked about that as well. And, you know, the reason is there's that hegemony there is that system has, in fact, been more successful than alternatives to date. But I always go back to one of the courses we studied in Harvard, which was called moral leadership. And so even that cathedral of capitalism, Harvard Business School, knew how important it was to understand the moral implications of leading corporates or governments, and wanted to embed that knowledge in the people that were travelling through that factory. And so I do think there's a lot of thought. I do think there's a lot of hope around people leading with good intentions. And, you know, there's plenty of examples out there, and they will continue to rise. And every so often you'll get a regressive period or a regressive leader, no names, but you know, they will be followed by others. And there's always pendulum swings in the societies we live in. And again, I think human nature has a great way to ultimately sustain itself over time. Sometimes I do worry about climate and our ability to act as a collective on that, but But
I've spoken a lot to the climate journalist John Gibbons about this, and politically as well. And it's the idea that democracy, the democratic system, isn't often the best way to solve problems like like climate. It's more like if you really want to solve climate now, you'd almost need the authoritarian model, the Chinese model, because they can move mountains in seconds. Whereas with us, it takes yonks to make decisions. Yeah,
and I'd never advocate that. No. You're right. But I think the middle ground is that to live within a democratic society that enables the voices of minorities to be heard, and that the people elect their leaders ultimately, of course, for all of the reasons that we don't need to go into. But within that, we're waiting, and we want and we hope for the strong strong-willed leaders who can make those good decisions and bring people with them within the democratic process. And there are examples out there, like Barack Obama some years ago, I think was a fantastic example of somebody who could galvanize that support and was benign in his outlook towards things like climate and healthcare and so on. And so every so often there are leaders like that can have opportunities, and we look forward to those continuing.
Yeah. As a doctor, you have opinions about GPs and their manner, maybe, do you?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I should only really speak for myself, but I mean, there's no one type of GP. Everybody has a different style. I do remember being in a surgery as a trainee once, and the GP was just focused on their computer screen and tapping away. And it didn't seem like they were listening or engaging with the patient. And then I kind of berated myself for being judgmental on their style, because everybody has a different style. And the truth was, he was unbelievably competent, and he knew his patients so well from a long life of working with them, that he was able to help and support them. And the patients were ultimately very grateful for that competence that he brought to the table. So everybody has a different style. And the nice thing about general practice is that it is general, and you have lots of different styles, and patients can find a doctor that suits them.
Mm-hmm. But I think it's you feel maybe some of them don't listen enough, maybe.
It's a habit. It's probably a bad habit that we interrupt way too soon. On average, doctor interrupts a patient after about 11 seconds. And I think myself, it's so important for patients to be able to tell their full story and to get all of the things on their chest out onto the table. So the importance of listening is really key, because the truth is, on average, a patient or a person will complete their story in about 17 or 18 seconds. So just a few short seconds later, you might have got their full and given them the ability to express it, get it all out. And there's so much value in listening to that story. Often a diagnosis comes from the listening part, the narrative part, and helping then that person get a better ending to the story that they've arrived with.
So, John, are you now doing in life what you believe you were meant to do right now? Or is there another, John, the moment of Damascus has arrived again. You are now a poker player in Las Vegas. Not that, but maybe.
Soul singer in Las Vegas, maybe.
You are now a black man in Detroit singing soul. No.
I love that.
Is it? Have you found what you wanted to do?
For sure. I'm really feel great sense of satisfaction. I still have diversity in the teaching and some entrepreneurship activities, but yeah, this is great. And
excuse me, sorry for being curious about this. Is it inequities in social justice you're interested in, or do you love human beings?
Well, and maybe there's a bit of inefficiency in the world around me as well. Like maybe the engineering brain comes through too. If I see something that I think can be done better, I stop and I say, look, you can't stop at everything. Of course, you'll never get to your destination. But I do. I'm compelled to try to make incremental improvements in the world around me, just because it leads for a better outcome for everybody.
So I'm trying to get to the basis of this. So I think I have it. So it's not as if sorry, forgive me for blowing smoke up your ass here, but it's not as if you're a messianic Jesus character in your mind who is compelled by love for humanity and emotions and tears to do this. You were compelled almost by an engineering critique of what you can see that's wrong, and you believe you have the tools to fix it.
You know what? I don't know the answer to that fully, to be honest.
I'm wrecking your head.
No, it's great to chat it through. I'd say neither of those are exactly accurate, but it's certainly not the first, no way. But yeah, maybe more the second, that there's opportunities to improve things, and why not?
Do you have children?
Two beautiful girls.
Two beautiful girls. What age are they?
They are 7 and 8.
Oh, 7 and 8. Are they old enough to slag you off yet?
Yes. I need to teach them how to do that a bit more, though. Yeah. They're brilliant. And my amazing wife, Lisa. So, do you know what? That's the single most important thing to me, is to do my best in that environment. And, constantly stumbling and failing and figuring things out and getting better. And so, look, life is very busy in a great way.
Yeah.
And that's my...
Well, John, you're leading an incredible life. And because you look only 26, you have another at least 80 years to do it. Your book is called A Shot of Hope. Briefly, what's that?
It's stories of people that I've met along that medical journey who found hope in life's toughest moments. And there's 18 chapters you can dip in and out. There's the set in Calcutta. The story of Raj I mentioned. There's a woman in prison who invests in her education to get away from addiction and drug pushers and goes from strength to strength. There's a young guy bleeding out in an emergency department trolley who's got calm kindness for everybody around him. And there's lots of really interesting stories and a diverse set of people who showed their resilience. And it's through the lens of my training, so it's a little bit about what I've experienced, but ultimately it's more about the people that I've met.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Dr. John Travers, your book is called A Shot of Hope, and it's stories from your adventures through your life to date. And thank you so much for coming in to talk to me, and it's been a pleasure meeting you as well.
Thanks, Mario.
And my thanks to the inspiring Dr. John Travers for coming in and talking to me on the Mario Rosenstock podcast. My thanks to you, of course, for listening to the podcast. Please tell one other person about this podcast. And my thanks, of course, to our great sponsor, Deluxe Bathrooms. Summer Sizzler sale ends July 13th, this Sunday. Thanks for listening. See you same time, same place next week.